David sat in his tiny apartment, staring at the blank canvas before him. The room was dimly lit, with only a single bulb overhead casting a warm but flickering light. The walls were adorned with his previous works, vibrant, emotional paintings that told stories of struggle, resilience, and hope. Each stroke on those canvases reflected a part of his soul, a testament to the years he'd poured into his craft. Yet, despite his undeniable talent, success seemed like a distant dream. David had grown up in a small, tight-knit neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, but the people were rich in spirit. His mother, a retired schoolteacher, had always encouraged him to follow his dreams, even when money was tight. David often remembered her words, "If you believe in yourself, the world will eventually see your light." It was this belief that kept him going through long nights of working odd jobs and early mornings dedicated to his art. Living in a cramped apartment wasn't easy, but David made it work. The peeling paint on the walls and the creaky floorboards reminded him of where he came from and why he needed to push forward. During the day, he worked at a local diner, serving coffee and pancakes to hurried customers. At night, he transformed his living room into a studio, tirelessly creating works that he hoped would one day hang in the finest galleries. David's first big break. One day, while scrolling through an art forum on an old laptop, David stumbled upon an announcement. A prestigious gallery in the city was holding an open call for new artists. The selected works would be displayed in a month-long exhibit, with the potential to attract collectors and critics alike. His heart raced as he read the details. This was the kind of opportunity he had dreamed of, the chance to showcase his work to a broader audience. David spent the next few days selecting his best pieces. Each painting told a unique story: a young girl playing violin in a war-torn street, an elderly couple dancing under a street lamp, and a lone figure staring at a stormy sea. These were not just images, they were emotions captured on canvas, born out of David's own experiences and observations. Word quickly spread in his neighborhood about the opportunity. His neighbors, who had always supported him, rallied around him. Mrs. Jenkins from next door brought him coffee, while Mr. Patel from the corner store donated art supplies. The children in the building excitedly chattered about seeing David's paintings in a big gallery. Their encouragement filled David with a renewed sense of purpose. The gallery owner. The gallery, known as Golden Horizon, was owned by Richard Sterling, a man with a sharp suit and an even sharper tongue. Richard had inherited the gallery from his father, but unlike his father, who had a genuine passion for art, Richard saw it merely as a business. To him, art was a commodity, and artists were just tools to sell his wares. Richard had a reputation for being elitist and dismissive. He believed only those with established names or prestigious art school credentials deserved a place in his gallery. For him, talent meant nothing without pedigree. Many aspiring artists had left his office in tears, their dreams crushed by his scornful remarks. The open call was a rare move for Golden Horizon, initiated more as a publicity stunt than a genuine search for new talent. Richard had little interest in the submissions, delegating the task to his assistants while he focused on wooing wealthy clients. The day of the submission. The day of the submission arrived, and David was both nervous and excited. He carefully packed his paintings, making sure each one was protected. Dressed in his best shirt and slacks, he boarded the train to the city, clutching the portfolio that carried his dreams. When he arrived at Golden Horizon, the grandeur of the gallery took his breath away. The towering glass doors, marble floors, and walls adorned with expensive art pieces made David feel out of place. But he reminded himself that his work deserved to be here as much as anyone else's. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The reception area buzzed with activity. Artists of all kinds, some carrying portfolios, others wheeling in sculptures, were lined up to submit their work. David joined the queue, his hands slightly trembling as he clutched his folder. He looked around, observing the diversity of talent, and felt a glimmer of hope. As the line moved forward, David caught sight of Richard Sterling standing near the front desk, talking to one of his assistants. Richard's polished appearance and commanding presence exuded authority, but his words soon revealed his true nature. Amateurs, Richard said with a sneer, loud enough for those nearby to hear. These open calls always attract the same type. People who think their little hobby projects are worth something. David's heart sank as he overheard the remarks. He felt a wave of anger, but quickly reminded himself why he was there. He wasn't just doing this for himself, but for everyone who had believed in him. When it was finally David's turn, he approached the desk with a mix of determination and apprehension. The assistant greeted him warmly, but Richard glanced at him with disinterest. "Name?" the assistant asked. "David Carter," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The assistant took his portfolio and placed it on a cart with the other submissions. David couldn't help but notice Richard rolling his eyes as he walked away. It was as though he'd already dismissed David without even glancing at his work. "Cheap work," Richard muttered under his breath, his voice dripping with disdain. "These people waste my time." David felt a lump in his throat but chose not to react. He had done his part, and now all he could do was wait. As he left the gallery, he couldn't shake the mix of hope and doubt swirling in his mind. Would they see the passion in his work, or would it be discarded without a second thought? As he stepped onto the train home, David clutched the sketchpad he always carried, drawing to calm his nerves. His journey was far from over, but he vowed to keep fighting, no matter the outcome. Little did he know, this moment marked the beginning of a transformation that would change his life forever. The review process. In the pristine, air-conditioned confines of Golden Horizon's conference room, Richard Sterling leaned back in his leather chair, sipping an espresso while casually flipping through the submissions. Surrounding him was a team of assistants, most of whom carried notebooks and laptops, nervously waiting for his next verdict. The open call had brought in hundreds of entries, and the pile of portfolios seemed insurmountable. Yet, Richard's demeanor suggested he found the entire process trivial. "Next," he said dismissively, tossing a portfolio onto the growing pile of rejections. His sharp, scrutinizing eyes scanned each new submission with a mixture of boredom and disdain. An assistant carefully placed David's portfolio on the table. The vibrant colors of David's paintings immediately stood out, even through the protective sleeves. The assistant handling it paused for a moment, seemingly captivated by the energy emanating from the artwork. "Who's this one?" Richard asked, his tone laced with indifference. "David Carter," the assistant replied. "His work is interesting. There's a lot of emotion in these pieces. Perhaps we should." "Emotion?" Richard interrupted with a scoff. "That's a polite way of saying amateurish. Look at this." He pulled out a painting of a young girl playing violin in a war-torn street. "This is basic storytelling. Too obvious. It's the kind of thing you'd see in a thrift store." The assistant hesitated. "But the technique." "Technique doesn't matter if the work doesn't sell," Richard snapped. "No wealthy collector wants a sob story hanging on their wall. They want sophistication, not sentimentality." Richard flipped through the other pieces, his critiques growing harsher with each passing moment. "Unmarketable. Overly dramatic. Lacks polish." He slid the portfolio aside without a second thought, signaling for the next submission. One junior assistant, a young woman named Clara, dared to speak up. "Mr. Sterling, I think there's a unique voice in his work. Maybe we should." "Clara," Richard said, cutting her off, "you're here to learn, not to question my judgment. Trust me, this isn't worth our time." The meeting continued, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was wrong. She glanced at David's portfolio one last time before it was whisked away, wondering what might have been if someone else had reviewed it. David's disappointment. A week later, David sat at his small kitchen table, anxiously refreshing his email inbox. His heart leaped when he saw a new message from Golden Horizon. With trembling hands, he clicked on it, only for his excitement to evaporate. "Dear Mr. Carter," the email began, "thank you for submitting your work to Golden Horizon Gallery. Unfortunately, we are unable to include your pieces in our upcoming exhibit. We wish you the best in your artistic endeavors. No feedback. No explanation. Just a cold, generic rejection. David stared at the screen, his chest tightening. He had poured so much of himself into those paintings, hoping they would finally open a door to the life he'd dreamed of. Now, it felt like all his effort had been for nothing. He spent the next few days battling waves of self-doubt. Was Richard right? Was his work too simple, too raw? Every time he looked at his paintings, the joy he once felt creating them seemed to fade, replaced by the stinging memory of rejection. One evening, while packing away his canvases, David received a call from Mr. Lewis, an older artist and mentor who had been guiding him for years. "David, what's wrong?" Mr. Lewis asked, sensing the despondency in his voice. David sighed. "I got rejected by the gallery. They didn't even say why." Maybe I'm just not good enough." "Don't you dare say that," Mr. Lewis replied firmly. "Rejection doesn't mean failure. It just means the wrong person saw your work. Your art has value, David. You just need to find the right audience." Mr. Lewis's words were a small comfort, but they planted a seed of determination in David's mind. He wasn't ready to give up, not yet. A social media breakthrough. Inspired by Mr. Lewis's encouragement, David decided to try something new. He created an account on a popular social media platform and began posting pictures of his work. At first, the response was slow. A few likes here, a couple of comments there. But David persisted, sharing not only his paintings, but also the stories behind them. One day, David posted a painting of the young girl with the violin, accompanied by a heartfelt caption, "This piece is about finding beauty amidst chaos. It's inspired by a story my grandmother told me about her childhood during the war. Art has the power to heal, and I hope this painting brings someone peace." The post began to gain traction. Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times. By the next morning, it had gone viral, amassing thousands of likes and comments. People from all over the world praised David's talent, with some even expressing interest in purchasing his work. Messages flooded his inbox. One stood out: a renowned art collector named Evelyn Harper had discovered his post and was eager to purchase the painting. "Your work speaks to the soul," she wrote. "I would be honored to add it to my collection." David was overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time, he felt truly seen, not by a gallery owner or a critic, but by ordinary people who connected with his art. Unbeknownst to Richard, Evelyn Harper was not just any collector, she had strong ties to the high-end art community. When she shared David's painting on her social media account, it sparked a flurry of interest among her affluent followers. Other collectors reached out to David, eager to purchase his work. One of David's pieces found its way into the home of a prominent businessman who frequently attended gallery openings. The businessman, unaware of David's history with Golden Horizon, mentioned the painting to Richard during a casual conversation. "You've seen Carter's work, haven't you?" the businessman asked. "It's extraordinary. Raw, emotional, and so relevant." Richard feigned recognition. Of course, he lied, hiding his embarrassment. The name Carter nagged at him, but he couldn't place it. Later that evening, Richard's assistant Clara, who had been following David's social media success, brought it up. "Sir, have you seen David Carter's recent work? It's gaining a lot of attention online." Richard frowned. Carter. Wait, wasn't he one of the submissions from the open call?" "Yes," Clara replied. "You rejected his work." Richard's face flushed with a mix of frustration and disbelief. He dismissed Clara with a curt nod, but deep down, he knew he had made a mistake. The world was beginning to see what he had overlooked, and it was only the beginning. A life-changing commission. David's phone buzzed one afternoon as he worked on a new painting in his now busy home studio. Since his viral breakthrough, he had been inundated with requests and inquiries from people eager to purchase his work. However, this message was unlike any he had received before. It was from Jonathan Grayson, a billionaire art collector and philanthropist known for his impeccable taste and investment in emerging artists. The message was brief but powerful. David, your work speaks to the very essence of the human experience. I would love to commission a piece that captures the theme of resilience for my personal collection. Name your price. David stared at the message in disbelief. He had heard of Grayson through art forums and media. This was a man whose patronage could elevate any artist to global fame. After taking a moment to collect himself, David replied, agreeing to the commission. He proposed a price that, even in his wildest dreams, he had never thought possible. To his amazement, Grayson responded almost immediately, done. Over the next few weeks, David poured his heart into the commissioned piece. He drew inspiration from his own journey, the struggles, the rejection, and the ultimate triumph. The painting, titled The Unbroken Spirit, depicted a solitary figure standing tall amidst a storm, their gaze fixed on a distant horizon where the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. When the painting was completed and delivered to Grayson's estate, it was met with overwhelming praise. Grayson shared an image of it on his social media accounts, where it quickly went viral. His endorsement led to a cascade of opportunities for David, including invitations to exhibit his work in prestigious galleries and requests for interviews from major media outlets. The media spotlight. David's story became the talk of the art world and beyond. News outlets picked up on his meteoric rise, framing it as a modern-day tale of perseverance and talent triumphing over adversity. Headlines like From Rejection to Recognition, The Inspiring Journey of David Carter and the Self-Taught Artist Who Took the World by Storm flooded the internet. In interviews, David remained humble, often crediting his community and mentors for their unwavering support. He spoke openly about the struggles he had faced as a Black artist from a modest background, shining a light on the systemic barriers in the art world. Critics lauded his work as revolutionary. One prominent art critic described his paintings as a perfect blend of raw emotion and technical brilliance, capturing the human experience in ways that resonate universally. Collectors scrambled to acquire his earlier pieces, driving their value into the millions. Through it all, David remained grounded. He continued to engage with his growing fanbase on social media, often sharing motivational messages and advice for aspiring artists. His humility only endeared him further to the public, solidifying his place as a beloved figure in the art world. Richard Schock. Richard Sterling, meanwhile, was having a rough day at Golden Horizon Gallery. Foot traffic had decreased significantly, and several of the gallery's top artists had decided to take their work elsewhere. Rumors swirled about Richard's dismissive attitude and his inability to recognize emerging talent, tarnishing his once pristine reputation. As he scrolled through his tablet during a lull in the day, an article headline caught his eye: "The world can't get enough of David Carter, from humble beginnings to art world phenomenon." His heart sank as he clicked on the link. The article detailed David's journey, including the viral social media post that had catapulted him to fame. It highlighted his recent successes, including the commission for Jonathan Grayson and the skyrocketing value of his work. Richard's face turned pale as he scrolled through images of David's paintings, pieces he vaguely remembered mocking during the open call review. Carter. Carter, Richard muttered to himself, trying to place the name. Suddenly, it hit him like a freight train. It's him. The one I called basic. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. How had he missed this? More importantly, how could he salvage his reputation now that the world was celebrating the very artist he had dismissed? Richard's troubles didn't end there. Word of his rejection of David began to spread, thanks in part to Clara, the junior assistant who had initially defended David's work. Other artists, many of whom had experienced similar dismissive treatment from Richard, began speaking out. Slowly but surely, Golden Horizon's once loyal clientele started drifting toward other galleries. David's decision. While Richard scrambled to address his mounting problems, David was busy making plans of his own. The financial windfall from his newfound success had given him the resources to turn a long-held dream into reality, creating opportunities for other struggling artists. David founded the Carter Foundation for Artistic Empowerment, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting underrepresented artists. The foundation provided grants, mentorship programs, and exhibition opportunities for talented individuals who lacked access to traditional avenues. But David didn't stop there. He also decided to enter the gallery world himself. "If the existing system won't change, I'll create my own," he told Mr. Lewis during one of their regular calls. After months of research and negotiation, David identified a prime location for his gallery, a space in the heart of the city with a rich history. As fate would have it, the property was none other than Golden Horizon Gallery. The financial struggles Richard faced had forced him to put the gallery on the market, and David saw it as the perfect opportunity to make a statement. The acquisition process was swift, and David took great care to ensure that the gallery would be a space that welcomed artists from all walks of life. He renamed it the Horizon Collective and began preparations for a grand reopening event. David's decision to buy the gallery wasn't motivated by revenge, but by a desire to change the narrative. "It's not about proving anyone wrong," he said in an interview. "It's about creating a space where artists can feel seen and valued, no matter where they come from." As the date of the reopening approached, word spread about David's bold move. Invitations went out to collectors, critics, and artists, including one that landed on Richard Sterling's desk. The stage was set for a confrontation that would forever change both men's lives. The air inside Golden Horizon Gallery was heavy with uncertainty. The staff whispered in hushed tones about the gallery's financial troubles and the mysterious buyer who had finalized the purchase. Rumors swirled about who the new owner might be, but no one knew for sure. Richard Sterling, the once proud gallery owner, sat in his office, trying to appear unbothered. Yet, his mind raced with worry. The gallery that had been in his family for decades was now slipping through his fingers, and he had no idea what would come next. David, on the other hand, was filled with quiet determination. The moment the paperwork was finalized, he stepped into his new role as the owner of the very gallery that had rejected him. For David, this wasn't about revenge, it was about transformation. He saw an opportunity to turn a space that had once been defined by elitism and exclusivity into a haven for artists who, like him, had faced rejection simply because they didn't fit the traditional mold. Before the official announcement, David decided to hold a private meeting with Richard. The man who had dismissed him as basic would now have to face the reality of his actions. The big reveal. Richard arrived at the gallery that morning, dressed in his usual tailored suit, his demeanor a mix of arrogance and unease. He had been summoned to meet the new owner, a meeting he hoped would lead to some kind of consultancy or advisory role. In his mind, his experience and connections were too valuable to ignore, even if he no longer held the title of owner. When Richard entered the conference room, he was greeted by a small group of people, including some of the gallery staff. At the head of the table sat David, dressed simply in a button-down shirt and slacks. For a moment, Richard didn't recognize him. But as the meeting began, realization dawned. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," David said, his voice calm and measured. "Thank you for coming." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Do I know you?" he asked, though the familiarity of David's face was beginning to unsettle him. David smiled faintly. "You should. I'm David Carter. You rejected my work during the open call last year." The room fell silent. Richard's face turned a shade paler as the weight of the revelation hit him. "Carter," he muttered, his mind racing to recall the details. And then it clicked, the paintings he had mocked, the assistant he had silenced. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual confidence faltering. "Well," Richard began, forcing a tight smile, "art is subjective, isn't it? Sometimes it's just not the right fit for a particular exhibit." David didn't flinch. "You didn't just reject my work, Mr. Sterling. You dismissed it without even considering its value. You called it cheap and basic. You didn't see the effort, the emotion, or the story behind it." Richard chuckled nervously, trying to regain control of the situation. "I see you've done well for yourself since then. Clearly, you didn't need my approval." David leaned forward slightly, his tone remaining steady. "You're right. I didn't. But there are countless artists out there who face the same rejection and don't get the opportunities one was fortunate to find. That's why I'm here. David's response. David stood, addressing not just Richard, but everyone in the room. Golden Horizon Gallery has always been known as a space for established artists, those with the right connections, the right pedigree. But art isn't about exclusivity. It's about expression, about telling stories that resonate with people, regardless of where they come from. He turned back to Richard. That's why I bought this gallery. To change it. This will no longer be a place where artists are judged by their backgrounds or their resumes. It will be a place where talent and passion are recognized and nurtured. Richard's face hardened. You can't just throw tradition out the window. This gallery has a reputation to uphold. David met his gaze. A reputation built on gatekeeping and exclusion? That's not the kind of legacy I want to carry forward. We're transforming this space into the Horizon Collective, a gallery that celebrates diversity and gives opportunities to those who have been overlooked. The room erupted into quiet applause from the staff, many of whom had grown tired of Richard's leadership but had never dared to speak out. Richard's fallout. As the meeting ended, Richard stormed out of the gallery, his face flushed with humiliation. His once lofty reputation in the art world was now crumbling. Word spread quickly about the confrontation, thanks to whispers among the staff and posts on social media. Artists and collectors alike began to distance themselves from Richard, unwilling to be associated with someone whose behavior had been so publicly exposed. Articles emerged detailing David's acquisition of the gallery and his plans to transform it. Critics praised his vision, while Richard's name became synonymous with the elitism that many felt had plagued the art world for too long. In the weeks that followed, Richard struggled to find his footing. His attempts to secure a position at other galleries were met with polite rejections, and his influence within the art community dwindled. Meanwhile, David's efforts to rebrand and revitalize the gallery gained widespread support. The grand reopening of the Horizon Collective was a resounding success, with lines stretching down the block. The inaugural exhibit featured works from a diverse group of artists, many of whom had never before had the chance to display their work in such a prominent space. Critics hailed it as a bold and necessary step forward for the art world. Richard's reflection. Sitting alone in his apartment, Richard scrolled through photos of the reopening event, the vibrant energy of the new gallery a stark contrast to his own solitude. For the first time, he began to question his actions and attitudes. Perhaps he had been too focused on maintaining an image, too quick to dismiss the passion and talent that couldn't be quantified by traditional standards. Though he would never admit it publicly, Richard couldn't help but feel a begrudging respect for David. The young artist had not only proven him wrong but had also created something far more impactful than a mere gallery. David had built a legacy of inclusion and opportunity, something Richard now realized he had never truly understood. David's first exhibition. The day of the Horizon Collective's grand opening dawned with a sense of excitement and purpose. The gallery, once a symbol of exclusivity and elitism, now stood transformed into a vibrant, welcoming space. Its walls were adorned with the works of artists from diverse backgrounds, each piece telling a unique story. From sculptures that captured the strength of human resilience to paintings that spoke of hope, struggle, and identity, every corner of the gallery exuded emotion and authenticity. The opening event was a spectacle. Bright banners bearing the gallery's new name hung proudly at the entrance, and the line to get in stretched down the block. Inside, the air buzzed with energy as collectors, critics, media representatives, and art enthusiasts mingled, eagerly taking in the stunning displays. David moved through the crowd, greeting guests with a warm smile and genuine humility. He wore a simple suit, his demeanor calm but confident. This moment was not just a personal triumph, it was a celebration of the countless artists who had been overlooked and underestimated. One of the highlights of the evening was a special section dedicated to the stories behind the artworks. Placards accompanying each piece detailed the artist's journey, many of which mirrored David's own struggles. It was a powerful reminder of the challenges so many face in the pursuit of their dreams. As the night unfolded, collectors made generous purchases, reporters conducted interviews, and critics scribbled glowing notes. One prominent journalist approached David, microphone in hand. "Mr. Carter, how does it feel to be at the center of such an inspiring movement?" David's response was heartfelt. "This isn't about me. It's about the artists whose work you see here tonight. It's about giving them the opportunities they deserve and creating a space where talent, not background, is what matters." The artists' gratitude. Among the attendees were the featured artists, many of whom had never imagined their work being displayed in such a prestigious setting. Throughout the evening, several of them approached David, their voices filled with emotion. "Mr. Carter," said a young painter named Elena, her eyes welling with tears, "I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. For years, I've been told my work wasn't commercial enough. But tonight, people are seeing it for what it is." An older sculptor, whose intricate designs had been relegated to flea markets for decades, shook David's hand firmly. "You've done more than give us a chance," he said. "You've given us dignity." Stories like these echoed throughout the gallery, painting a vivid picture of the impact David had already made. The artist's gratitude was genuine and profound, further solidifying David's belief in the power of inclusivity. Beyond the exhibition, the Carter Foundation for Artistic Empowerment was making waves globally. Its grants and mentorship programs had already helped dozens of artists gain access to resources and platforms they had previously been denied. Social media buzzed with stories of lives changed by the foundation, turning it into a symbol of hope for aspiring artists worldwide. A public apology. Meanwhile, Richard Sterling watched the success of the Horizon Collective from the sidelines. The gallery's transformation had been widely covered by the media, and David's story had become a shining example of resilience and vision. In stark contrast, Richard's reputation had continued to decline. The art community, once eager to associate with him, had largely turned its back, citing his dismissive and elitist behavior. Under mounting pressure, and perhaps a growing sense of guilt, Richard decided to issue a public apology. In an open letter published in an influential art journal, he wrote, "To David Carter and the many artists I have failed to support, I owe you an apology. My narrow-minded approach to art and my inability to recognize the value in diverse voices were wrong. David's success is a testament to the talent and perseverance that I chose to overlook. I hope this serves as a lesson, not just for me, but for the entire art community. It's time for change." The apology made headlines, sparking a mix of reactions. Some praised Richard for taking accountability, while others viewed it as too little, too late. When asked about the apology during an interview, David responded with characteristic grace. "I appreciate Mr. Sterling's words. But words are only the beginning. What matters is action, creating an industry that truly values and supports all artists. That's where the real change lies." A legacy of change. As the months turned into years, the Horizon Collective became a beacon of change in the art world. Its exhibitions consistently featured fresh, innovative talent, and its commitment to diversity inspired other galleries to follow suit. The Carter Foundation continued to expand its reach, funding art programs in underserved communities and providing scholarships to aspiring artists. David often reflected on his journey, on the struggles, the rejection, and the eventual triumph. He visited his old neighborhood frequently, staying connected to the community that had supported him through the hardest times. One day, while walking past his childhood home, he paused to take it all in. The small apartment building, the narrow streets, the echoes of laughter from children playing, all of it reminded him of where he had come from and how far he had traveled. Mr. Lewis, his longtime mentor, joined him on that walk. "You've done something incredible, David," he said. "But tell me, what's next?" David smiled. "This isn't the end, Mr. Lewis. It's just the beginning. There's so much more to do." The story of David Carter became more than just a tale of personal success, it became a symbol of hope and perseverance for artists everywhere. His gallery flourished, his foundation thrived, and his work continued to inspire countless individuals. In the end, David's legacy wasn't just about art, It was about proving that talent, passion, and perseverance could overcome prejudice, opening doors not just for himself but for generations of artists to come.